things of nature, things of that 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 nature.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Pod of That Nature. Curtis Wilkerson here, joined by my man, Andrew Ellis. Talk a little fall camp with you guys today. We are powered by Inside Arkansas. That's right. If you missed the memo on Friday, John, Andrew, myself, we're rebranded, relaunched, and man, we're ready to hit the ground running, covering the Razorbacks again. We're very, very excited. But before we get started, we need you guys to do us a favor, okay? So you can be tapped into everything that we have coming your way, and it's a lot. You got to subscribe to 2 YouTube channels. Okay. I know. I get it. Like, that can be a little bit annoying, but there's a method to the madness here. So bear with us. For all of our football content, practice clips, pressers, our daily live stream at noon, Monday through Friday, Inside Arkansas Live, our post-game shows, our watch parties, our breaking news live, get subbed to our Inside Arkansas YouTube page. There will be fresh content up there every single day. You just heard the rundown of it. That's a fact. But if you're a fan of the Pod at the Palace, our basketball show, if you're a fan of the Bombastic podcast, our baseball show with Andrew, make sure you go get subscribed to the Locked On Razorbacks channel. Very, very important. We're really excited. We're pumped to be powered by Locked On now, a national podcast network where every single morning, Monday through Friday, you're going to have the Locked On Razorbacks podcast with John Neighbors. And every afternoon, you're going to be getting either a Pod at the Palace or a Bombastic podcast with us. Oh, by the way, we have more than 20 written stories already up, as well as feeds, subscription links to all our videos and pods at our new website, InsideArkansas.com. There's a lot going on, people. We're making up for lost time. We're excited. Make sure you get tapped into both those channels. At any rate, Andrew, apologies for the monologue there, but it had to be done. Let's talk a little bit of football, shall we?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. I mean, we got this sucker launched just in time for the Scott Fountain press conference. That's what we built this whole company around.
Yeah.
Was getting there in time for the Scott Fountain and the specialists day at the media, which is kind of funny because, like, you know, Curtis and I have been covering fall camp. This is not our first fall camp we've covered together, not our first time being on the beat together. But it was kind of funny to be like back. We kind of had that like back in the saddle feel. And then it's like Scott Fountain and Devin Bale and Eli Stein. But yeah, it feels great to be back, man. And, you know, like you mentioned, you know, subscribe, make sure you're tapped in with everything we're doing. I give it until maybe mid-November before we stop getting questions of like, wait a minute, what's going on here? You know, like people that are still trying to figure out what's been going on and all that.
Where's Bombastic?
You know, the good thing is, like you said, Curtis, we will be here every day to remind you exactly where to be, where to go. You won't have to look too hard to find our content. And, you know, you mentioned the website there with the 20 stories going already. InsideArkansas.com. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, it's that alone helps us. I mean, if it were just the website, we feel like you would be getting all you need to get for your Razorback sports gear. If it were just this YouTube, we would feel like you were getting all you need to get for your Arkansas sports fix. And if it was just the Locked On, I feel like it would be enough to where it satisfy most sports fans. I mean, there's plenty of people who have been subscribed to that Locked On podcast for 5-6 years, and they're that's how they consume it. And so I feel like we're kind of mixing all these things together, and it's great, man. I don't think fans are ever going to complain that we don't have enough content out there covering the Arkansas Razorbacks, but that's the way we want it, man. That's the way we want it. And, you know, this is what we eat, sleep, and breathe. So this is what we do.
For sure, man. For sure. Okay, let's get into it. Fall camp. I thought this would be kind of a fun exercise because we announced our relaunch on Friday. Camp started Wednesday, obviously, so missed a couple days there. We're hitting the ground running with our coverage now. And so it feels like we need to do a little bit of a vibe check now, and then maybe run this back a little bit later in camp or after a scrimmage or two when the depth chart starts to shake out a little bit. But we're hearing all the right things in these interviews and pressers, right? We're seeing all the right things. This team is more together. It feels different, whatever. Is it Camp KoolAid, man? Or are you buying into the idea that the vibes are restored and that this could really be different with this team this year?
So a little bit of like yes and no. I mean, the first one, it's obviously Camp KoolAid. Like it's objectively Camp KoolAid. And look, there's nothing wrong with that. If you're a head coach and you're in fall camp, you would be an idiot if you went to the press conference and you were like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm not seeing it. That would be.
Oh, you're right. Like Vanderbilt's not doing that right now. They're up there
literally
saying, no, like we feel good. We're going to shock the world. You're right. 100%.
And I mean, you think about like last year, for example, Arkansas, there was clearly something that happened within that locker room where, I'm not saying Sam Pittman lost the team or Dan Enos or whatever, but it was a broken locker room. Definitely by halfway through the year, you could see that. I'm not saying that started in camp or whatever, but it's like, we didn't know that covering the team. I don't think the team knew that at this point in the year last year. So even the worst FBS team in the country who is going to hate each other by the end of the year and have everyone transfer, even right now, they're probably like, excited for the year. Let's put our best foot forward and all that. And so I think it's hard just to ignore that it definitely is Camp KoolAid. That being said, Curtis, I am buying a little bit, at least that the vibes are better than this time last year. I think that there's this team. It's been an interesting offseason where I think this program, from Sam Pittman all the way down, they've had to do a little bit of soul searching of who are we going to be? Like, what are we going to be about? And I think there's been a concerted effort for that to be different. I think Travis Williams, I want to give him some credit because I feel like 6 months ago, we were kind of looking at Travis Williams where we're like, man, you're losing all these linebackers. Like, what are you going to do? So it's kind of like, it was like a little bit of a, we saw some chink in the armor a little bit. And then all of a sudden the vibe, like you mentioned, feels a lot better. I mean, Travis Williams is going viral for his cool rap and everything. And, you see this team and you see the way they carry themselves. You see the way they interact with each other. They certainly don't seem like a team that hates each other and that is worried about what's going to happen this fall. Not saying they're just going to be great or anything, but I don't get the vibe that this is like a program that's like crumbling here right now. Which frankly, like that's the vibe I was getting 8-9 months ago. So they've done something a little bit to at least pretend like they like things are in a good place and all that. We'll see how long it lasts, but I do believe that this team on both sides of the ball is a lot more together as a unit. Will that lead to wins on the field in the fall? You need a little bit more than being together to win games in the SEC, but I do think that this team is going to give itself a better chance just because of that, the program kind of coming together a little bit. And I think they have better leadership on both sides of the ball, frankly. And so, we can get into a little bit more of the specifics in terms of how this team actually is going to stack up position by position to some of the SEC teams. But I think from a vibe standpoint, which is kind of what we're talking about right now, I think they're at least in a pretty good spot, but they're not alone in that regard because I think everyone in the country feels pretty good right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think as far as I'm concerned, I'm buying the idea that the vibes are a lot different than they were when they were getting skull drugged by Missouri at the end of last season. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But I'm not necessarily sold though yet that this is any different than any other camp or what anyone else is saying anywhere. Like I need to see more before I really buy into that. Honestly, like there were some things about the spring that really made me feel like, hey, you know what? Something good could be brewing here. You mentioned the leadership. We'll talk about Taylor Green a little bit later, but I agree. Like, I like that. I feel like it's better. It seems that way on the surface. You never really know for sure until adversity starts to hit and the bullets are flying, whatever. But there were also some days during the spring scattered around there where I kind of felt the exact opposite, where I was like, man, I don't know. It just feels a little bit off, kind of going through the motions. Some of that is just spring ball. Because, like after a certain point, how excited are you about that? It'll kind of be the same thing in camp. Like once they get through the initial, we're excited to be out here, we're rolling, and then the 2 deep starts to take place. And so over half of your roster knows they're not going to play. You don't have a game still for a couple weeks, and you just kind of get into the monotony of it all. Maybe I'm just thinking about it too much. I don't know, but I was sipping that Camp KoolAid last year, Andrew, and I picked Arkansas to go 8-4, and I look like an idiot. I'm not going to like overcorrect the other direction just in spite, but like they're not fooling me again. I'm watching it like a hawk.
No, I'm 100% with you. I mean, I think anybody realistically, now look, I'm not saying this team can't go 8-4, can't go 9-3, can't do whatever. I mean, I'm not going to put a ceiling on any team. I mean, there's a lot of talented guys on this team. In college football, Missouri just went 11-2, man. If Missouri went 11-2, I'm not going to disqualify anybody from going on a special run like that. But I would just say, like, if that's your expectation and kind of your like what you're expecting to happen, I think that's just a bizarre way to look at it. I mean, especially given just what this program's been over the last few years and just kind of where they're at in the state of college football. But Curtis, you mentioned kind of in the spring some of those moments where you're kind of, oh, is this good? Is this bad? I'll tell you what I think this team does have, and we always use the term iron sharpens iron in fall camp. We're in prime iron sharpens iron season. But I was thinking back to the spring and sort of some of the developments we saw. And I remember one of the last spring practices that we went to, I was on my way out. I was walking out, and I remember seeing like a little bit of a mini fight breakout. And it was one of those, and we saw that happen a few times where like DBs would start chirping at running backs or whatever. I think this team has a competitiveness with each other that I do think, I mean, at least right now, is at a healthy level where it's at practice. I mean, especially in spring where you're trying to develop, you're trying to kind of make your mark. I think that kind of stuff, I'm not saying you want your players fighting, but it doesn't seem like the kind of thing where it's players mad at each other over stuff. It seems like it's just kind of, we're butting heads every day. We're going at it one-on-one, and, you know, we got a little fueled up here and there. And,
we got some
that's the kind of stuff you kind of want to see. So we'll see. Then all of a sudden, if this team goes 4-8, we'll look back and say, you remember when they were fighting in spring practice? That was a sign or whatever. So as reporters, as journalists, that's what we view ourselves as here.
Revisionist history is
we're good at spinning the narratives any way we can. But as of right now, I do feel like this team is a little bit more closer and together. But yeah, I mean, I'm just looking back to the spring. I feel pretty similarly right now than I did when we left spring. For those that remember, we did like a post-spring game live show where we kind of went live, the two of us and John, and we just kind of talked about where we felt about this team. And I don't feel terribly different now than I did then. And where I feel is going to be a competitive, improved team. Still not quite sold that they're going to be improved enough, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, to make like a real mark in the SEC. But I don't expect this Arkansas team to be a team where we're like dreading watching them every Saturday, which frankly, that's how it was last year. I mean, by about week 3, I was like, good Lord, man, I'm not looking forward to watching this team. And I think we're at least going to clear that bar. And so we'll see how it goes, man. But I'm really excited to see kind of what narratives start to form in fall camp as we get a few more days, weeks into this thing.
Yeah, that's a really good segue, because one of the things I'm most interested to see, I think, develop over the course of the next couple of weeks is who out of these summer additions could maybe crack that too deep and make an impact for this team. You know, like how effectively did Pittman and the staff go out and address the needs they identified during the spring? Because, I mean, they had a list there of things that they needed to accomplish. We'll dive maybe more into specific position groups in a minute. But linebacker, I mean, it was obviously a biggie. So eyes are on those newcomers in particular. I thought Sam Pittman had some pretty interesting things to say about a couple of those guys, Larry Worth and Anthony Switzer, the other day. And I know you clipped that out. So let's listen to that, and then we'll see what we think about it.
Coach, you touched on this a little bit, but Worth was more linebacker at his previous stop. Switzer was more D-back safety. Why go the other way, those guys?
Well, part of it, Trey, is a need. You know, part of it is where we need guys. The other part of it is that Worth has so much speed that, you know, he could play inside, he could play outside. We're trying to see, and we probably will switch that maybe after 2 or 3 days to see. But Switcher looked really good inside today. I mean, really good. Look, you know, unafraid, very aggressive. Obviously, we don't have pads on, but still, in pads or out of pads, you're going to find out a little bit about the guy's aggressiveness and his ability, his physicality. So I kind of like where he's at in there now. And it's basically about needs, about where we're trying to find. Obviously, you need them all over the place, but you want your bigger, faster, stronger guys as close to the ball as you can get. So that's what we're trying to do right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question there by Trey. I think if both of those guys hit, I feel quite a bit different about Arkansas's potential as a defense this year. I mean, Switzer was good at Utah State. He was an all Mountain West guy. Worth, you know, he racked up numbers at Jacksonville State. So who knows how that's going to translate, but you know, he played linebacker there. He also started 4 games at nickel. So, you know, Sam's talking about the versatility there. But if you're able to add in the summer, it's different. I think people, because the basketball portal, it's different than football, right? Like you got the 2 windows with football. Usually you get your dudes in that December window, like right after the season. The post spring, it's usually just like, filling out some
Fill out the
depth or
roster.
whatever.
Yeah.
Like if you get some dudes who can crack the rotation in the summer, that's good for you. I'm intrigued
Trey
by these
Wades.
guys. The Trey Wades, exactly.
Well, Curtis, I think first I just want to say I think that might be the most fall camp clip of all fall camp clips. One, because you got Trey Biddy asking the question, which I mean Trey's a staple of fall camp.
Oh yeah.
But you've also got Pittman talking about the cross training because you got the guys at different positions. That's like the cross training is the buzzword that we love this time of year. When he starts talking about the cross training with the O line, D line, and all that. You also have a coach reacting to a non-padded practice, talking about the physicality of a linebacker. It checks all the boxes.
Yeah.
Talking about a newcomer that no one's seen, and it's just like it checks all the boxes. That is the most fall camp clip of all time. But seriously though, when you talk about what newcomers have a chance to crack the 2 deep, I mean, you just got to go right to that linebacking core. Just because of how, I mean, that's pretty much every time we got on a mic during the spring, we were like, hey, who are they going to have at linebacker? I mean, you just want bodies there. And so you mentioned like kind of guys you fill out the roster with, and I'm not saying that these 2 guys are that. I mean, Switzer, you can make an argument is one of Arkansas's best, most respected transfers. But I think like you mentioned, if both of those guys are hits, you just feel a little bit different. Worth to me, I mean, coming from Jacksonville State, a guy who's played a lot, maybe not at the SEC level, but has some experience, older. He seems like the exact kind of guy that you would want this linebacking group to have, just because you don't have a ton of experience. You've got some young talent. You've got a guy in Sawy who's an intriguing prospect there, but you don't really have anywhere it's like, hey, we just need a body. We just need depth. And I feel like Worth kind of checks that box. So it's interesting to me that they so immediately kind of moved him around. I just figured it was like, if you can get either one of those guys to be a pretty good linebacker, you'll take it. But I am intrigued by the Switzer aspect of it, and just to see if he sticks around there at linebacker. Because like we said, I mean, he seems like a guy who's a pretty safe bet to contribute on some level.
Sure.
And, with Arkansas's defense and kind of the way that Travis Williams likes to mix things up, likes to bring pressure from weird areas, I'm kind of intrigued by the possibility of them moving those guys around and sort of finding which positions they're most dangerous in. And, like nowadays in college football, the nickel position has become such a big deal where you kind of have to have that guy, whether it's a guy who can defend the slot receivers or to kind of get in the box there and help your run support or whatever it is. And I think both these guys are the type of people who could maybe end up being in some of those, whether it's a certain package where it's a, bigger lineup where you're having Worth there at the nickel spot or whatever. I think both these guys have a good chance to contribute. And so I think if you're looking at newcomers, and when we say newcomers, we're talking about guys that joined the team this summer, right? Not the guys who we saw go through spring practice like your Xavier Sawy. I think those 2 guys are kind of the 2 headliners. But Curtis, I'm also thinking this defensive line is gonna need some. I mean, we there's some guys that you trust, that you feel good about, but I think Arkansas is kind of in a position where it's up for the grabs in that 2 deep on the D line, where who's going to be those guys that emerge. I hope I'm saying this guy's name right, Danny Saily. I'm intrigued just to see. I mean, he's a guy that started at Hutchinson JUCO, went to BYU, and now he's there at Arkansas. We'll see. He's drawn some nice reviews from his teammates. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair to say. Let's play this clip from Cam Ball. It was funny, but also very nice.
Cam, I want to ask you about Danny Saily. What are your thoughts on him, and you think he can help you this year?
Yeah, I feel like Danny can help us a lot. Just him not necessarily being undersized, but he's probably about 6 foot, 6'1", just for his center of gravity, not being so, I want to say short, but him, being a little down there. Just he's a strong, he's stable. Let's go stable. He's a strong kid, man, and he has good technique, coming from out of Hutch and BYU where he came recently. He's going to play a major part in our defense, especially in the defensive line, and we love him as a person, and he's a great addition to the defensive line.
Shout out to Taylor Green for the assist there. He could see his guy was struggling a little bit. He's like, he needs a word here. He needs a word that'll be nice. But I also love that we're talking about a guy who's 6 foot, maybe 6'1", as like this short king out here. He's like,
Yeah,
just
man.
this little bowling ball.
Shout out to the short kings. He's on the roster, he's listed at 6'3", 375. So maybe that's a little bit generous on the height, but yeah, that's pretty funny, man. And you know what this is reminding me of? And he's obviously quite a bit heavier. But who was the dude, the bowling ball that they got from Arkansas State a couple years
Terry
ago?
Hampton.
Terry
I was
Hampton.
thinking about him, and I feel like there was some other short defensive lineman that Arkansas had that wound up being a way more pivotal piece than they thought. He's given me a little bit of those vibes. And, Terry Hampton, going back to him a little bit, he was a guy that we weren't expecting much of at all.
Yeah, he
remember
wanted
your boys in Jonesboro were kind of like, I don't think he's going to help. He ended up playing like as many snaps as just about any defensive tackle at Arkansas that year. And so, I think Arkansas is in not desperate need because the D-line, you've got it, that front 4 or 5 guys you feel pretty good about. Oh, yeah. But I think Arkansas could certainly use a guy to kind of emerge and be a legitimate, give you 20, 25 snaps a game type of guy. And it'd be nice if Danny Saili, the short king, who may or may not be 6'3", if he could step up and fill that void.
Yeah, it's weird, man. I mean, it's almost like calling me a short king,
Yeah.
I've never got that one. So I don't know. Oh, and I did want to backtrack real quick because I was jogging my memory during that video. I feel like there was another guy in that linebacker mix that they brought in over the summer. Steven Dix was the guy.
Marshall.
From Marshall. Yeah, put up some pretty, I think he had like 64, 65 tackles there last year. Marshall's a pretty solid program. And then he started his career, I think, at Maryland. So, ACC, some power conference experience. So that's another guy, maybe to keep an eye on. But yeah, between him and Switzer and Worth, like if all 3 of those guys hit or 2 of them, man, you just feel a lot better about the depth there. And so let's get into position groups here. The ones that we think have the most stake, the most stuff at stake here in camp. Linebacker, obviously, we've talked about. I mean, they're both unknowns, Andrew, Brad Spence, and Xavier Sori, but I still feel pretty good about them being competent contributors on an SEC football field. But man, you got to have more than that. Like, you got to have at least one for sure. Ideally, you have a couple that you can rotate in and out of there. So, if these guys hit, then you feel pretty good about it. But I actually want to start with the offense because they stunk last year. But oddly enough, I feel most comfortable
way
with
better
that
about
side
that
of the
group
ball
than I
this
did
year. Yeah. And I don't know if that's the Petrino effect or what, but does anything stand out to you in terms of question marks there on offense that you really got your eye on?
So there's not really position battles per se that I'm like, I'm not looking to see like, hey, who emerges here? Because I feel like with the offensive line, you've kind of got your 5. You got Carmona at left tackle. You've got Patrick Kudus there. You've got Addison Nichols at center, Braun at right guard, and at right tackle. Blackstock seems like that battle ended after one day in the spring. It seems like he's going to be the right tackle. We'll see if Tykeus Crawford works his way in there because I know we love to talk about Tykeus Crawford.
The annual position battle.
He is the most covered 5th-year senior who has never started in the history of Arkansas football. But
I want him to be great.
Line, I'm not looking to see like who the guys are. We know who the guys are, but I am interested to see just narratively speaking. I don't think national observers are looking at Arkansas's offensive line, particularly after last year and how the group played. I don't think people are looking at it like, oh, that's a star-studded group there. I think it's kind of one of those like, they're fine. They got some guys that'll probably contribute. You assume Kudus will take a step forward, but I think that group is maybe the group we haven't talked about a ton all off season, just because it's kind of, like I said, we kind of know who the guys are, but that group is going to determine what the ceiling for this offense is, because we know what Taylon Green is, and I think he's a talented player who has a high ceiling and can make a lot of things happen. Maybe not going to be as consistent as some folks want him to be. But I think he's a talented guy who, given if you put him in the right situation, surround him with the right pieces, which I think Arkansas has in their wide receiver group with guys like Andrew Armstrong, Isaiah Satania, Jaden Wilson, the list goes on. And I really like the tight ends. I like the running backs too. I think Jaquindon Jackson's an awesome, legitimate, awesome, well-rounded back. R-Dub is, I believe, overqualified as a backup running back. So I feel really good about all these pieces I look around. It's all about whether that offensive line is going to give them a chance. And I think this group is set up to give them a chance. But I'm just wondering, like, is this going to be one of those Pittman offensive lines like the 2014, 2015 teams who just really overachieved and kind of controlled the line of scrimmage against some teams and allowed that 2015 offense was really one of the best Arkansas offenses I can think of that didn't have Bobby Petrino. And now you have Bobby Petrino. You have all these pieces all these little toys, these fancy toys that we like. We see Taylor Green running. We see Isaiah Satania running. What are those big boys up front going to look like? Are they going to really be that group that takes that massive step forward? Because, I mean, if they're even above average, Curtis, it would be like the most improved position group in the country. Because, I mean, they were one of the worst in the country last year.
Oh, man.
So if they were top half of the SEC, I mean, that would be a massive improvement. But I don't think it's unrealistic.
No, I don't either. And you're 100% right, man. Like, that impacted everything last year. Those guys really, really struggled. And it's not like Arkansas didn't have talent at the skill positions last year. The wide receiver core is the exact same. KJ Jefferson, we had seen in the past what he was capable of doing. Rocket Sanders was still in the backfield. I mean, they had the pieces there, but man, everything crumbles at the foundation there. I feel really good about that front five. I like the camaraderie. I like, some of those guys have a little bit of edge to them, like you talked about, got some stuff to them. That's good. With them, I think that five is set. You do need depth though, because it's a tough position. That was one of the things they dealt with. Like, is Devin Manuel healthy? Is Chambly, like, what's going on? Mm-hmm. And that was part of the issue. And then you're moving Kudus around because you don't know. And can Limmer snap the football? It's just one thing after another. And there was no continuity there. So if somebody goes down, like, can you really rely on some guys? And Tykeus Crawford is always going to be the flavor of fall camp in terms of the next man up, and we need to create a position battle for him. And maybe he can go in there and kind of make the most of his abilities. Joe Moore, the transfer, I've heard him mentioned a couple times.
Seems like they like him.
Seems like they like him. Marion Harris, you hear about him every year. But are those guys really ready to step up and fill the void if they need to in the event of an injury or something? We'll see. But I agree. I think it's going to be an improved group. And you mentioned Taylor Green a little bit. I mean, I think the biggest question for me, or the biggest unknown, might be at quarterback. And don't get me wrong, like, I love Taylor Green. We've been able to spend quite a bit of time with him because he was, on Bron's podcast with us and everything quite a bit. Love him. He gets it. He's a smart kid. He's a natural leader. I think they've upgraded in a lot of areas at that spot. But we are talking about a guy who's got a sub 60 completion percentage for his career. Right? We are talking about a guy who was 11 touchdowns to 9 interceptions and lost the job for a while at Boise State last year. So, he's a dual threat, and we still haven't been able to see him use his legs and let those shine because they don't hit the quarterbacks in practice. So that matters. I think it's going to be a factor. But I do think it's fair to be, a little bit skeptical about whether or not he becomes a dude now that he steps up a level into the SEC. I think he's going to be fine. But how good can he be? Because you got to have that guy. If people really are going to try to buy into this, hey, this team can win 7, 8, 9 games, whatever. You got to have the quarterback back there. And so you talk about his high ceiling. I agree. He's got it. But how close can they get him to reaching that ceiling? I think is the big question there. And, he's Bobby P's handpicked guy, so we'll see.
Well, so Curtis, as a guy who has a lot of friends who are not Arkansas fans, when you're talking football in the offseason, it doesn't take long for someone to say, who y'all got at quarterback? Who you got playing quarterback? Whether it's NFL, whether it's whatever. And I'm kind of with you where I've been hesitant to start tooting the horn and being like, this Taylor Green kid, I'm telling you, I do think, and I've told all my friends this, I think there's going to be weeks, particularly against non-conference, against certain matchups where, and he's a little bit of a high variance player. He's going to have weeks this season where I think he's going to look like an NFL quarterback, where he's going to light it up, airing out D balls. He's going to rip off a 60-yard run. I think he's going to have special moments, probably a couple in every game, to be honest with you. But I'm with you, Curtis, where there's a little bit of revisionist history because of how well he played in the spring game, which, by the way, not for nothing. Like, I was encouraged when I saw that because it kind of showed me, okay, this guy kind of rises to the occasion. He played his best game of the year in the conference championship last year. Like, he seems like a guy who is better when the lights come on, which I know we always heard that about KJ. But it wasn't a day-to-day. He was great every day in spring practice. I mean, we went there to scrimmages and charted every throw. And there were some Saturdays where it really wasn't great and where some of the other quarterbacks were more consistent than him from an accuracy standpoint.
Sure.
So I'm kind of with you where I'm ready to see kind of where he ends up falling, because you can kind of talk me into anywhere from like the 6th best quarterback in the country to a so-so high variance, gunslinger who's not going to be super you know what I mean? Like, I can kind of be talked into a lot of different things. So I'm interested just with fall camp. I mean, we hear about the leadership, and I think when you speak with Taylor Green, like, he has a presence about him, like in real life.
Yes.
You can kind of see the leadership there, just the way that his teammates respond to him. And so that's kind of why I give him a lot of the benefit of the doubt. But I am interested to see, just by the end of fall camp, I feel like the team will have a pretty good idea of how they feel about their quarterback. And so based on the spring, everybody we talked to was like unanimous approval of Taylor Green. He's the man. So when we get into the season and we start seeing Bobby Petrino calling plays for him, you can kind of tell with quarterbacks how much their play caller trusts them by what they're doing. When it's 3rd and 3, are they looking for are they rolling them out, get them a little safe throw? Or are they kind of trying to ease them into the game? What kind of situations are they going to throw this kid into? I'm excited for all of them, man. But I also truly believe that, we talked about that O-line and if they're going to be solid, and I think they will. I think this is a pretty good situation for Taylor Green to develop to the best of his abilities. I think Petrino, there's something about that combination. Petrino really liked him when he was trying to get him to go to Missouri State back in the day, which he quickly realized this cat ain't coming to Missouri State. But I think there's a reason why Petrino kept his eye on Taylor Green and why he was the first guy that he went after in the portal. I think he sees something in this kid's skill set that he can take advantage of, and I'm gonna trust Bobby P when it comes to the quarterback position.
Yeah, and on to your point about leadership and hearing him speak and everything like that. On the mic, Taylor Green is way closer to Felipe Franks vibes than he was KJ Jefferson.
KJ,
I
love KJ. I genuinely love KJ Jefferson. Like, I'm gonna remember his time at Arkansas fondly. I know everybody.
I'm watching UCF a lot this year.
He got to a point where he was like, because they media train all these guys.
Oh yeah.
Where like you could tell KJ was like trying to do the media training stuff where he was trying to be like bland and coach speak, and he would somehow just not say anything. It was kind of crazy, and we would talk to him so much. But yeah, I think Hog fans will like. I think Taylor is a lot more insightful, a lot more like thoughtful when he's speaking in those situations. Not a super like rah personality guy, but
no,
you can tell that all his teammates genuinely love him. And talking about leadership, the offensive line, that's another thing that I like about that group. Fernando Carmona especially, just seems like he lights up the room everywhere he's at. And I think that's a thing that this team has that last year really just didn't have, frankly.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. We kind of buried the lead here though, man. Like, position groups with the most at stake in camp. The obvious answer, Andrew, is kicker. Okay. If the goal is to finish these close games that you didn't finish last year, you better be able to make field goals, brother. So, like, if you think people have been pissed at Scott Fountain, fairly or not, the past few years, Arkansas ranked in the top 10 nationally in overall special teams metrics last season, first of all. But there's going to be torches, pitchforks coming for that man if they're not kicking field goals better than they did in the spring. It was not pretty. And he talked about it in his presser the other night about, behind, we evaluate him in 3 ways, and, in practice and just, normal kicking, whatever drills, they were fine. But in the stadium, with people there watching, they were about 50%. Well, there's going to be people at the stadium watching. And so they got to be better than that.
If they could just get another pandemic and have no crowds, maybe this kicking situation will work itself out. But
yeah, exactly, man. And so, Vito Calvaruso, Matthew Shipley, those 2 guys were kind of going at it in the spring. They obviously weren't satisfied because they went out and got a couple more kickers. Kyle Ramsey out of Abilene Christian was the guy that was mentioned a lot in the presser yesterday. What's the other kid's name? Do you remember the other kid's name?
Oh, let me
read
it
earlier.
Charlie Vondermeeden.
Love it, man. But listen, like, believe it or not, I think it's one of the most important position battles and the truest position battle of camp. And maybe the biggest question mark for this team, because as rough as the offense was for Arkansas last year, and they were operating at an advantage. They were playing on a short field the whole year. Like, you get to the 40-yard line, you got a great chance of putting 3 points on the board. Not only is that not the case going into this season, like, you probably need another 10 to 15 yards before you're really feeling comfortable. Right now, I mean, it's depending on how camp plays out here, but I don't know, man. Like, do we really want to live in a world here where Sam Pittman's having to make multiple send the field goal unit out or go for it on fourth down decisions every week? So
I was going to say if you want to, like, Sam Pittman has a lot of pros and cons as a coach. Fourth down management is not one of his pros, not his strong suit, I wouldn't say.
We need it to be a no-brainer for him. Like, you get across this marker and it's like, yep, kick it. And I don't know if that's going to be the case.
So Matthew Shipley, the Hawaii transfer, on paper seemed like the guy all off season. I mean, like, if you look at it, I think he went 16 of 20 in his sophomore year there. Then went 14 of 18 last year. So it's like right around 80% on both. You know, you look at that and you think, all right, that's your kicker. You don't have to worry about it. But like you said, you know, in the spring, it did not look like that. There was not a clear front runner. And we love Vito. We've loved Vito for years here. You know, you and I feel like we've been tooting that horn for a while.
Touchback king.
Vito, place kicking has not been his strong suit in his career. Neither guy was really. I think you don't bring in another kicker in the offseason if things didn't go well. I mean, unless if you felt great about your kicking situation and you had 2 or 3 options, I don't think you go out and seek more in the summer.
Correct.
And I think that kind of speaks to a little bit how concerning it was in the spring, that especially with fans there. And by the way, they claimed that, like, oh, when there weren't fans, these kickers were crushing. I think that's not true, because I remember being there one day and staying to watch the kicking battle, and it didn't go particularly well. But
yeah,
you know, like I said, Matthew Shipley on paper seems like the guy. And Scott Fountain said yesterday that his holder at Hawaii wasn't that great. So I don't know who that kid is, but he caught a stray from Scott Fountain. And so he seemed to, like, have confidence in Shipley and I don't know, maybe he's just trying to speak him up publicly so that Shipley has that confidence in himself. But yeah, it's a little bit of a weird situation, and we'll see who emerges from that and see who ends up winning the kickoff job. I mean, Vito a couple of years ago was literally the, like, number 1 or number 2 kickoff guy in the country. So you imagine Arkansas is going to have some options there. And by the way, I do want to give Scott Fountain a little bit of credit. As you know, Curtis, I've been somewhat critical of Scott Fountain, as a lot of people have, behind closed doors and stuff. But I got to give the dude credit when it comes to developing kickers, because I mean, Cam Little was a huge prospect coming out of high school. So maybe you don't want to give him full credit for Cam Little. Okay, fine. He also had the Rodrigo Blankenship kid at Georgia. There's another kicker, Daniel Carlson at Auburn. He coached him. Jake Bates, you remember that guy, the kickoff guy for Arkansas? He just won the job. He's the Detroit Lions starting kicker. He couldn't even start at kicker at Arkansas, and he's a starting kicker for an NFL team now.
Was he? Didn't he bang like a 64-yarder in the? Yeah.
Right. I mean, he clearly has some type of. He can at least spot the talent at kicker. So it's like I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt here, especially because, like you said, last year's special teams was the strength of Arkansas's entire team, was their specialty units. And so I imagine the situation is going to work itself out. And I think that's going to be a fun storyline to kind of follow throughout camp, that we'll be getting updates, on throughout. And, we don't get to see too much of the practice. So it's tough for us to really say, what we feel about the situation. But also, Curtis, one position group I just want to touch on real quick, punter. This offseason, nobody expected that to be a storyline that, oh yeah, Max Fletcher's not going to be the punter for Arkansas this year. I think we all just kind of penciled him in as, oh yeah, he had a great year last year, all SEC, here it is. Then I remember we noticed that the camp battle in spring was seemingly not going his way. Like, I was like, wow, this Devin Bale kid's like punting, pretty well. Even I, in that moment, didn't think they was going to end with Max Fletcher transferring and going to play with his brother at Cincinnati. But Devin Bale's the guy now. And we got to hear from him at the press conference yesterday. He seemed like he's confident. And Fountain said it, and he also echoed it, that it was a little bit of a weight off his shoulders that Fletcher left, because it's like, okay, I don't have to compete for this job anymore. It's my job. I can get back to playing, because he started 2 years at Northern Colorado and did a pretty good job. So it's interesting to see just, there's going to be a lot of new faces for this Arkansas special teams unit, aside from Isaiah Satania returning the punts. But yeah, we'll get to kind of just learn on the fly what Arkansas has at kicker and punter, because right now I'm not saying they're question marks, but we just don't know. And so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because last year special teams was the only thing Arkansas did well, and so they're not able to replicate that a little bit. It might be a little concerning.
No doubt. I want to end with this, and I want to hit you with just a classic line. If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. But here in Arkansas fall camp, if you can track a fly ball, you can field a punt, right? How about Monty Harrison, the former MLB player, 6'3", 230 pounds, 29 years old, in the mix at punt return? It's Isaiah Satania's job. We know that. But the fact that this dude is getting reps and that he went to Scott Fountain and said, hey, I'd like to return punts. And Fountain looks at him like he's crazy. And he's like, dude, I played center field in Major League Baseball. I can track
I called off Mike Trout for a few fly balls. I can handle this, dude. Yeah.
I absolutely love it, man. And if he doesn't get at least one opportunity to return one, like, let's think about it. You're at War Memorial and you're beating UAPB, 52-3 in the fourth quarter. Do you really want to put Satania back there, no. Get Monty Harrison
Unless
back
you want to
there.
do a thing where you just rack them up, get him like 3 return touchdowns,
dude,
see if you can build them up a little bit.
And listen, I mean, Nate Perotti returned a punt for a touchdown against UAPB. So if he can do it, you got to give Harrison a shot back there. Blow out fourth quarter, let him field one and just let him go to work. It'd be electric.
I don't hate it. I mean, and you mentioned how big he is as a human. So it's like, you don't see a guy like that and you think, oh yeah, punt returner. But punt returner is a little bit different, where it's just a different skill set in terms of tracking the ball down, change of direction and all that. It's not necessarily always your 5'7" guys that do it. I mean, Traylon Burks is one of the better punt returners Arkansas has had over the last 5-6 years, and he's like 240, dude. He's a massive guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be fascinating. Kick return, by the way, I'm a little bit intrigued because another thing I've always thought about is like when you have a guy who's a really good returner for you, but he's also a key contributor on offense, I feel like it's always smart to sort of limit how you use him. And so I'm wondering if Isaiah Satania really ends up being like the number 2, number 3 option at wide receiver. Does it maybe make them think, okay, maybe we'll do him punt return, but we won't do kick, or maybe kick and not punt or whatever? Right. Jordan Anthony is the name that Fountain mentioned yesterday that if it doesn't stick out to you, I don't know why it wouldn't, because I mean, he's a track guy. He's the fastest guy on the team by all accounts. At least according to College Football 25, the video game, he's got 98 speed, which I mean, that locked it down right there. I'd be interested to see if that kid can do some things on kick return. He was a guy that as a receiver in camp, his first couple days, it was like, oh man, this guy, it looks rough, but he sort of started to turn it on a little bit towards the end of the spring. Had some nice moments in the spring game. So I'm interested to see what he can do at receiver, but also I think kick return, if they want to limit Isaiah Satania's usage a little bit, which would probably be smart, I think Jordan Anthony would be an interesting one at kick return, just finding that seam and let's see that 10-2 speed on display or whatever it is that he runs. I don't know his times. But yeah, I'm interested to see just special teams. There's a lot of questions, man, but a lot of just unique athletes on this team. I mean, Monte Harrison, that's going to be a cool story if he does anything, just having a guy who played in the MLB. We're not talking about a guy who, like Brandon Whedon, who was a double-A pitcher for a couple of years and now he's playing. This is a guy who played with Mike Trout, played in the MLB for a few years. Got his cup of
coffee, man. Legitimately.
Yeah, it's legit stuff, man. So yeah, that'll be a fun story, and it's cool to see it happen at not kicker or punter, because I feel like a lot of times when you see that, it's kicker, punter. Like Brandon Whedon was cool because he was a quarterback, but it's cool to see a receiver who's just a 52-year-old college athlete. It's awesome.
Exactly. Well, man, I think we covered it. You got any parting thoughts here? Anything else you need to get off your chest?
Nothing else I need to get off my chest, man. I'm excited, man. But I will say, I will just caution everyone. So Curtis, like 6 months ago, Curtis said to me off air, he was like, you were kind of getting me to hold you accountable of like, don't let you drink too much Kool-Aid. Don't let yourself like get too buzzed out on this football team. I'm going to issue that same warning to everyone. I'm not saying you shouldn't be excited for football. I'm not saying you shouldn't be excited about this football team, frankly. I actually like this football team. I've enjoyed being around them, and I look forward to seeing what they can do this season. I'm excited to watch them, but just relax a little bit. Don't start texting your buddy who's an Auburn fan and being like, we're kicking your ass in week 5 or whatever it is. Like, don't start doing that. Just wait it out. Let's let the dust settle on this fall camp, and we'll see if all these narratives and these storylines stick. But for now, there's been some intriguing developments, and I'm just excited to get back in the mix and just cover this team every day, man. It's gonna be fun.
Absolutely. Well said. That was a poetic ending to what was fun, man. It feels good to be back. Appreciate everybody for rocking with us. For those who did before and have stuck around, and for those who are new to this, we appreciate you all the same. Again, make sure you get tapped into everything. Subscribe. 2 places. Don't forget that. We know it can be confusing, but like we said, there's a method to the madness. Inside Arkansas YouTube page, do it. Okay. Locked On Razorbacks, do it. Get subscribed. Roll with us. We're excited. We got a ton coming your way. And man, like I said, it just feels really, really good to be back. But we're going to get out of here. For Andrew Ellis, it's been Curtis Wilkerson, the pot of that nature with Inside Arkansas, and we will catch you guys very, very soon.